Everything great. I believe the all 5 board members are now here. We'll do the roll to find everyone. Let me first call the meeting to order. It is 6:05 p.m. on Monday, April 25th, 2022. This is a meeting of the Eugene School District 4J Budget Committee. My name is Josh Burstein. I am privileged to serve as the chair, and I will do a roll call. And just let me know if you're here or present or otherwise able to be here. Yeah, okay. Dakota Boulette.
I'm here.
Here. Joshua Burstein, that's me. I am here. Gary Campbell.
I'm here.
Hey, Gary. Tom DiLiberto.
I'm here.
Hey, Tom. And Fifield.
I'm here, now not muted.
And Alicia Hayes.
Here.
Gordon Leifer.
Here.
Judy Newman.
Here.
Laurel O'Rourke.
I'm here.
Maya Rabasa.
I'm here.
Erica Thesson.
I'm here.
And Juan Carlos Valier.
I'm here.
Great. So all 12, we have 2 vacancies on our committee based on the 2 vacancies on the board. But so of the 12 people still active on this committee, all 12 are here. So let's see. Call to order, and then budget committee. I'm looking at the agenda on 1-1, which is what we've done, call to order, roll call, and then budget committee presentation. I'm not sure what that refers to. I may ask staff to help for a minute, or I may just jump to number 2, agenda review. Looking for Lisa or Carrie. Well, let's go to the agenda review. And so, like I said before, we're on a very tight schedule today. The board, their work is never done. They had a meeting right before this and right after this, I believe, to interview people for those 2 vacancies I mentioned. So as we look at the agenda with items for action at this meeting, obviously after the minutes, to then have the public comment, and then under items for information, the largest chunk of our meeting, of course, we have the superintendent's budget message and then the proposed budget. The document is linked there. The slides were sent out previously, so if you have them in your email, if you don't have them in front of you, check your email from a few days ago. I think it was Thursday. And then budget committee discussion. And what I would suggest, given the timing, is that having looked at some of the slides, I think that some of what we as individual committee members presented as our priorities and also as a committee, some of those are in the slides and in the document and in the budget presentation today. So let's do this. Let's watch the presentation. If you have questions, maybe jot them down. Let's hold them for the end to make sure we can get through it. I trust that Sydney and Andrea will be as quick as possible. And then after that, as you see on the agenda, I'm up to room number 5, number 3, budget committee discussion for questions and information requests. And that's also where, if we have more of our individual priorities or that kind of thing, I think that's where we can also bring that up. And obviously, if we have more information requests, for next time, it can be brought back by staff. So let's first, though, go to Roman numeral 3, committee administration, the approval of minutes for those 3 meetings. I believe we can have a motion for all 3 together. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I'm seeing nods, so let's hope so. Anyone have a motion?
I move that we approve all 3 of those meeting minutes.
Thank you. Motion by Erica. Any seconds?
I second.
Dakota second. Any discussion on those minutes? Seeing no hands, I'll call the question. All in favor of approving the minutes from those 3 meetings, February 28, March 14, and March 28. Gordon, is that raise your hand? Okay, so I thought it was a question, Gordon. Raise your hand or otherwise indicate. Great, I see 12, I believe. Any opposed? And if you are, maybe say something so I can hear your voice, because I may not have all the people in front of me on Zoom. I hear none opposed. Any abstentions? I hear none. I believe we're 12-0 approved. Great, thank you. Number 4 is items raised by the audience. This is for public comment. And let me ask Andrea or Carrie if there's any people signed up for public comment.
We do not have anyone signed up for public comment.
We do not. Okay, so I will not read the statement we read about that. However, if later in this meeting, someone does sign up for public comment in some way or indicate they're interested in that, I'll ask staff to let me know. At this point, we are up to number 5, items for information, and we are already half an hour ahead, which is great. So we'll have the superintendent's budget message and then proposed budget. And then, as I said, let's let them get through it. I know they'll do it expeditiously, and then we could have questions after that. And the one thing I'll just remind everyone, if you don't have a copy of it, and I printed out because I'm a paper person, it looks something like this, but not as fuzzy. Anyway, but it should be in your email from, I believe, Thursday. So if you want to have the PowerPoint in front of you, or while it's being shared as well too, on the screen, we will do that. I will turn it over without further ado to Sydney, I guess, right?
Thank you so much. Good evening, members of the Budget Committee. Thank you for your continued service and support for our students, staff, and districts. This year, much like the last, has been an exceptionally challenging year. Responses to the pandemic continue to add more responsibility and hardships on 4J employees, students, and families.
Sydney, let me interrupt for 1 second. You're echoing a little bit, at least from what I'm hearing. I don't know if others are hearing that too. It may just be my connection. No? Okay, never mind. I'll strain. It'll work. Keep going. It works. It's working. I apologize.
Okay. The protocol's escalated budget impacts and can be expected to have ongoing budget implications in the years to come. Even with the last 2 years of COVID impacts, we are at a very hopeful point, building on our mental health services, supporting our students with needed learning supports, adding career technical education programs that support both our students and our community, and working to continue our wraparound services to our families. In the immediate future, we're looking ahead to summer programs. The district offers summer school classes for selected students every year, and we are looking to expand services this summer with additional funding from the state of Oregon. We are partnering with our community organizations to offer enrichment activities for 4J students for a nominal cost or for free. Some of these partners include the YMCA, Kids Sports, River Road Parks and Recreation, and Northwest Youth Corps, just to name a few. Looking to next school year, we are planning to provide equitable and inclusive access to full-time in-person learning for every student, every school day, all year. We will continue to offer an online option for families who prefer to keep learning from home at this time. For kindergarten through 5th grade, this will be mostly synchronous online classroom learning using district curriculum. Online learning for the middle and high school students will continue with a mostly asynchronous curriculum to meet students and families' needs. Whether in person or online, we should have more students in our schools next year. We expect to see 4J's enrollment go up from this current year after 2 years of discouraging declines because of the pandemic. We've seen our student numbers go down during COVID, and we were far from the only district to experience these drops. Across the state of Oregon, almost 30,000 fewer students throughout the state are attending at this time. 4J's enrollment dips can be seen mostly at the early grades. We hope and expect that enrollment will begin to recover as the pandemic recedes. We expect to have additional student needs and unexpected costs related to the pandemic in the coming year. We are grateful to have continued support from federal and state one-time funding targeted to help schools support student, family, and staff needs. These funds include the ESSER funds, which stands for Elementary and Secondary Schools Emergency Relief Fund. The budget you will hear about tonight aims to address some of the needs and other priority areas to support our students and staff. We have continued to build on our equity work that started in spring of 2020 by elevating the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Instruction with the hire of 2 director-level staff to lead the program and create a district-wide equity advisory committee. We've added regional equity coordinators as well as dedicated staff to coordinate and support student affinity groups and elevate their positive impact on students. These affinity groups, or student unions, provide time and space for students of shared affinities to come together in an environment where they make up the majority. Affinity groups help build networks both within and beyond the group through sharing experiences and belonging strategies. At every 4J high school, paid staff members facilitate each of the 5 affinity groups. District-wide staff coordinate the affinity program across all schools and support the students and staff with the school level groups. The 4J supported affinity groups are Black Student Union, Latinx Student Union, Asian Pacific Islander Student Union, Native American Student Union, and Gender Sexuality Alliance, otherwise known as GSA. We have added mental health specialists and other positions to support student well-being. In additional effort to support students and families, the district hired 4 social workers to support each high school region and a district-wide coordinator. These licensed staff members provide systematic, developmental, and culturally responsive guidance and support essential to the success of each and every student. In spring of 2020, as the economy was reeling from the introduction of a global pandemic, 4J acted quickly to help the rapidly growing numbers of our families in need with emergency funding from the Eugene Education Foundation. Staff were reassigned from other departments to establish a wraparound team to support the many 4J families who were experiencing increased need. When the pandemic began, we also quickly shifted to providing free meals to all students. First as grab-and-go meals while school buildings were closed, then in school cafeterias once schools reopened. The federal and state funding that supported the district and offering meals for free to every student is running out, but our budget plan for next year continue to recover from the pandemic. Another ray of sunshine in a partially gray year is the expected completion of Edison Elementary and the start of construction for the new Camas Ridge Elementary School. This summer, Edison school staff will move into the new Edison building, and Camas Ridge will transition to the Willard Swing School location, so site work and the new building can start this year. The Gillum expansion of 4 new classrooms and an auxiliary gym is set to complete this summer as well. And finally, North Eugene High School is on schedule for completion next year to open in fall of 2023. You will hear more about all of this and more in the budget overview to follow. Andrea Bells will walk you through the proposed budget presentation. Before I hand this over to Andrea, I just want to say thank you once again to our community and to you, the members of the Budget Committee, for your continued support and service for our students, staff, and community. I also want to commend our staff for working diligently to take care of students and families through every shift and transition throughout the pandemic. Essentially, every staff member did 2 jobs: the regular work and the extra work required due to pandemic protocols. We collectively experienced so many challenges the past 2 years, and what carried us through it and made us stronger was our connection and support for each other. Thank you all.
Great, thank you too. And let's move right to Andrea. And then feel free to share your screen if you're going to. Okay, thank you.
Yep, definitely. Just a sec, let me bring this up, make sure I'm on the right screen. Okay, can everyone see the presentation? Okay, thank you. So tonight we're going to start looking at the proposed budget, the all funds budget. So next year we're looking at $547.9 million in all funds. Roughly half of that is our general fund spending. The other half is made up of several different areas, including our capital projects fund. This percentage is down about 9.8 percentage points. This is precisely due to the fact that in the past, as we were working through contracting and setting up various projects for our bond funds, we left this appropriation open so that we could be flexible. We have now contracted for most of our work planned for next year. This reflects those contracted amounts. Looking at our debt service fund, we are up about 3.5 percentage points from 5.3% of the total last year. We completed the issuance of $120 million in bond funds. This is from our 2018 bond measure that was completed on the 19th of April. And this portion of the budget now includes principal and interest payments on this additional issuance. So that has popped back up to where it normally would be. In our original plans, we had planned to issue these dollars in 2021, but we had not spent down the original issuance of 150 million to a point where we felt it was needed to go out. So we waited a year and now have moved forward with that second issuance in the plan. And finally, we had a change of 4.3 percentage points in our federal, state, and local programs fund from 14.8% of the total last year to 10.5%. This is a combination most of two factors. We had our awesome grant. This was a capital grant that was associated with the original issuance for our 2018 measure of 150 million. We received $8 million from the state of Oregon in this grant to support the expansion of Gillum, as well as other projects. That has been completed, so that has dropped off of our budget. And in the current year's budget, we had budgeted for all of our ESSER $3. This was when we had originally received our award, but did not yet know how we would spread that spending out over 3 years. We now have an approved 3-year budget from the Oregon Department of Education. And so our budget for ESSER 3 for next year reflects that planned spending and does not reflect the total still left to be spent over the next several years. Looking at our general fund resources, we are looking at resources from our state school fund formula of about 86.2% of our general fund revenues. That's down 1.3 percentage points from last year. It really isn't a sign that we're receiving a lot less from our state school fund formula, but rather that the percentage of the pie from local option levy has increased. We are up at over $22 million from our local option levy. So we are up about a 0.5 percentage point from last year, up to 10.3% from 9.8% in 2021-22. So we're really holding steady on the state school fund formula on our other revenues and transfers, but we are seeing increases year over year with our local option levy. Looking at our general fund requirements for the year, really here we are up on our personnel costs. You can see this year we're at 86.3% of our general fund. In the previous year, we were at 84.8, 1.5 percentage points difference. Where we see those changes is in salaries as a percentage of the total, and also in two other spending areas that have been adjusted to support other spending. The first is our post-employment benefits. You'll see that is 0.2% here. In the previous year, we were at 0.5%. and $1 million of transfers from the general fund to support this for the coming year to support our nutrition services program and free meals for all. We will take that $1 million and we will split it $650,000 to nutrition services, and $350,000 to the post-employment benefits fund. Our current fund balance within that fund allows us a limited period of time when we can make this transition to support nutrition services. Also looking at other expenditures and transfers. In the previous year, that was about 3.5% of our general fund requirements. It is now at 2.2%, 1.3 percentage points lower. What this reflects is the discontinuance for a 3-year period of 3 of our reserve transfers. That is our school technology transfer of 1.5 million, our staff technology transfer of 1 million, and our equipment reserve transfer of $750,000. Those transfers have been suspended for 3 years to support the negotiations that we just concluded. Other than those items, all of our other areas are in line with previous year's budgeting. And looking at our general fund, our schools and departments mix, we are up on the schools side. You can see this year, 75.5% of our spending is related to schools. That's up 2.4 percentage points from last year when it was 73.1%. Where we are seeing our growth is in our student services, up 0.9 percentage points from 15.5% last year, and our elementary schools up 0.8 percentage points from 24.6% in the previous year. Looking at elementary staffing, one of the important things looking into our next year is that we have great hopes, as the superintendent said, that we will see many of our students return to the classroom, that we will see enrollment increase rather than decline, but we do know that that is unlikely to happen all in 1 year. However, we wanted to ensure consistency and stability for our staffing and for our schools. So we have maintained the teaching staff at our 2021-22 levels. This is the year where we expected to see over a 700 student increase. So this means that we have not reduced our staffing, even though we do expect to have fewer students coming through the door. It's going to take a little while for us to come back to our pre-pandemic enrollment, but we have maintained these staff to address class size, and we are looking at 35 licensed FTE difference between what we would have staffed and where we are today. Continuing, we are going to continue our education assistance for our kindergarten classrooms. That's a 5.5 hour kinder EA in each classroom. So that's 55 additional classified hours to get our current kinder allocation up to that 5.5 hours. You will also see a 4-hour EA for each of our first grade classrooms. That's 138 classified hours for next year. And that is going to see an increase in our costs here for elementary staffing. That's about $4.5 million for general fund and about $1 million out of our student investment account grant. Looking at middle school staffing, we have done the same, where we have maintained teaching staff and we have added staff to ensure that we have not only addressed classroom size, but also expanded elective opportunities. That's 13.6 licensed FTE at a cost of about 1.6 million in the general fund. And talk about our other funds. These are the funds that we talked about at the March 28th meeting, kind of went through, and all of the other activities that we have out here. You can see here that some of our numbers have changed quite a bit over time. You can see with things like our debt service fund here in the green, that this is actually the impact of our $150 million issuance, that first issuance of the 2018 bond measure. You can see in 21-22, we did not have as much shift because we had not issued additional bonds yet. And then we start to grow again with the second issuance of that bond measure of 120 million. Looking at our capital projects funds, you can see that as we move through the process, as we get our contracts in place for work, that we are becoming more precise in our budgeting and moving through these projects to complete them. Federal, state, and local programs, all of the red here. We have the impact of course, our ESSER funds, as well as the growth of our student investment account dollars in this area, partially offset by the end of our awesome grant, that $8 million that was spent down for Gillum and other projects. In most other areas, we've been, as you can see, relatively consistent. Looking ahead to the next year, we have an opportunity to continue to provide free meals for all students in the next year. That is going to be supported by a $650,000 additional transfer from the general fund to the Nutrition Services Fund. And we also have set aside federal emergency grant funding in the case that we have a continued impact from the pandemic. This would be ESSER $3 that have been set aside for emergencies to ensure that we can meet any challenges that might come our way. This action is sustainable in 2022-23 and the following year, but past that point, we will be looking at a significant increase in the cost to continue to do this. So that will be something that the Budget Committee and the board will need to assess when that comes up. But for the next year, we have this transfer in place and planned to continue to provide free meals. Looking at federal, state, and local programs next year, we will have a budget of about 57.6 million. 14.7 of this is going to be our ESSER 3 grant. So this is going to be a variety of programs and supports. They are listed out within the budget document. And if you have any questions on specific items, please, bring them to us and we'll be happy to go into more detail. We're expecting about $13.4 million from the student investment account next year. That is $100,000 less than the amount that we had originally hoped to see way back when. If anyone remembers, it was 13.5, but we're getting very close here. We will not only have that, we expect to also have about 2.4 million in summer spending. This is carryover funds that we will use along with the state summer school grants to support programs for enrichment and education for our students this summer. So that will be well spent there. With our title programs, we're looking at about $6.5 million overall. Of course, Title I is our largest program there at approximately $5 million. High School Success, our Measure 98 grant, if you remember back that far, we're looking at about 4.4 million next year, plus about 1.3 million in summer spending to continue to provide those great programs for our high school students to receive credit for what they do in the summer. ESSER 2 will be wrapping up next year. We have a little bit of money left, and that will be about $4.2 million, but we do expect to complete our spending for the ESSER 2 grant prior to the end of that funding in September of 2023. So not expecting that to go much farther than this next year. Individuals with Disabilities Act, the IDEA program will be 4.3 million. And finally, the IDEA American Rescue Plan. This is one-time dollars similar to our ESSER funds. And this is focused for our students in, that are also being served through IDEA. We will use this 0.8 million on some staffing that we'll talk about a little bit later. And also braid it in with our ESSER $3 to provide additional supports for this student group. Grant funding, you can see that it just pops up right there as we get into 22 and 23, this is the effect, of course, of our federal ESSER $1, $2, and $3. You see that coming in, especially in 2022, when we appropriated the entire amount of ESSER because we did not know yet what our spending was going to look like. So we had gotten a total allocation. We had appropriated all. Now you see us kind of dropping back to where our approved 1-year spending would be. For state revenue, you can see that we start to pop up in 2020. This is some of the impact of our Awesome grant, that $8 million I mentioned previously. But then as we move forward, we're also seeing growth related to SIA and the CAT tax funds here. Looking at our student investment account, this, of course, this information is presented in detail in the budget document, but I was just going to kind of roll through here with some big picture, items for what we will be spending in the coming year for SIA. Something to remember is that, as we've spoken previously, this program, along with High School Success and 4 others, will be braided together into one ODE, you might say, initiative, one grant process. We will be doing a large amount of community outreach in the fall, and that community outreach will paint the picture for where we go with all of these programs into the next school year. So that's going to be the work that we do to prepare for the 2023-24 budget. Looking into next year, we are basing this on our original community outreach and work. We expect to spend about $3.5 million on improving 3rd grade reading, 2.2 on the Learning for All model. This is our student services program that they are piloting here. We will be supporting the 2 positions that serve in our natives program so that we can utilize the grant funding from the feds for this for other services to students and be able to pay for those staff dollars through SIA. Looking at the emergent bilingual student success, about $1 million here for teachers and classified folks to support our students who are bilingual. Looking at health and safety, of course, we've seen behavior framework and support services, continuing to support that area and work there with 2.2 million. Our wraparound support teams, we've talked about this quite a bit, about $3 million will go into supporting those efforts in the next year. A little bit of staffing for class size reduction. This is additional staffing at the middle school and high school level. And finally, we have some time for the best after school and summer programs. This is for expansion and support. The other thing to remember is that both best after school and our summer programs are also supported through our ESSER 3 grant. 20% of our ESSER 3 grant must be used to address learning loss. We have focused those dollars in the areas of summer programs, best after school, and tutoring or other supports. And then we have a small amount of staff here, about $500,000, to support high school success plans to fully schedule all students. So this is really focusing on helping to expand schedules for our students in 11th and 12th grade. Looking ahead to high school success, one of those other programs that will be braided in when we go back to work in the fall to talk to our community. For career and technical education, we have about $1.3 million that is going to help us expand programs in the areas of health services, technology, construction, and manufacturing. We have a small amount under our college level educational opportunities category that is going to help our students pursue opportunities to expand participation in the advanced placement in international baccalaureate courses. And finally, dropout prevention. We have about $2.8 million, including about 15.9 FTE, and this is going to be supporting various initiatives, including of our focus on our 9th grade students and getting them into high school and successful and all the way to graduation, and implementation of our 9th grade academy program. Looking out here, you remember that I mentioned we have the American Rescue Plan, the ARP dollars, as well as some ESSER II grant funding left. We are going to be putting these dollars to good use by providing some additional supports for our student services department and programs. So you can see here we have some additional special education teachers, school psychs, mental health specialist, a behavior consultant, 1.5 licensed FTE for occupational and physical therapists. We have 2.1 licensed FTE for speech and language specialist. And as previously mentioned, we are going to have 4 classified positions, one in each of our regions to support 504 plan support. So this is in this coming year, this is going to be supported with our one-time ARP dollars as well as our ESSER II grant funding. We will continue these supports in the ESSER III grant in the following year. And finally, just a few extras along the way here. We have brought up a teacher mentor program. This program we hope to be fully staffed next year at 8 licensed FTE at a cost of about 0.9 million. We're looking at some additional funding through High School Success for a young parent program teacher, a full-time person there, and a half-time GED special education teacher. And we are looking to have some equity and inclusion supports, some additional positions there, about $1.5 million. Finally, as we've mentioned before, we do have a ESSER III staffing pool at 1.4 million. This is in addition to the regular staffing pool that is maintained in the general fund of $1.75 million. So looking at our 2022-23 proposed budget, our ending balances and contingencies. In the general fund, we are looking at all in about $49.1 million. Most of this is our operations and our PERS reserves, but we also, of course, maintain an ending fund balance amount and a contingency amount. Just a quirk of the budget process here is that the board requires us to maintain a 5% ending fund balance by policy. That ending fund balance is made up of this amount here. You see the ending fund balance of 8 million and 2/3 of the contingency amount. 1/3 of the contingency is available for spending as the board deems necessary in emergency situations. The other 2/3 remains intact and becomes part of that ending fund balance, that 5%. Looking out across the other funds, we have a fund balance in our post-employment benefits fund of about $2.5 million. This is why we were able to, in the following year, reduce our general fund transfer down by $650,000 because we do have enough of a ending fund balance built up in this fund to take a hiatus from those transfers for a couple of years. Looking at our school resources fund, we have about $1.5 million. These are funds held for our students, that's student body dollars. Debt service fund, these are dollars that are held to pay, of course, our principal and interest payments. And our insurance reserves, these are the reserve funds for our licensed, classified, and admin folks, as well as our wellness clinic and our risk management fund. And that pretty much comes to the end of the slides. Just a reminder, what we will ask you to do as a budget committee when you are ready is 2 actions. One is to approve the proposed budget, both the general fund total and the other funds total. And the second action is to declare taxes and levies. This is declaring the general fund tax rate, the local option levy rate, and the dollar amount of the debt service fund tax levy. So this is the final action that is asked of the Budget Committee when they have completed their work. And I am done.
Thank you. That's amazing to see how we have almost $500 million and what we can do with it. Still not enough. Let's go to some questions. I see a hand from Gordon, and then I see Juan Carlos, and then I see Gary. And obviously others will pop up, but let's start with Gordon.
Thanks. I have a
And then Maya.
there you are, Andrea. I have a couple of questions. I'll just say them and you can respond in any way. One is the last thing about approving the budget and setting the levy. That's something the board does, right? The budget committee is advisory to the board and so might recommend on that, but my understanding is that's a board action and not a budget committee action.
That is actually, the Budget Committee does move forward the proposed budget. So they do, and then the board actually adopts.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
And then I wanted to ask about it's in the short session. My understanding is the legislature passed something that creates that gives every school district some money for staff recruitment and retention. And I wanted to know if there's an estimate of how much of that might be coming to 4J, and if it's repeating money, or I mean, I know it's just a 2-year budget, but as far as the 2-year budget goes, is it intended to be repeating money, and how does that get used?
So my understanding, it is 1 year's worth of funding. I know a lot of people say, well, why 1 year? This is because we're in the middle of the biennium. So the legislature can't put out past the end of the biennium. I have not been informed by ODE that we are receiving any of this funding.
Oh, and that's not going out by some formula to all districts?
I don't believe so, but we have not received any notification in finance.
Okay, thank you.
And just for the queue, I have, and it's just across the top of my screen, so hopefully this is the right order. Juan Carlos, then Gary, then Tom, then Maya, then Laurel. So let's go, Juan Carlos.
Thank you. And I wanted to start by just making a quick comment. Superintendent Van der Kar, I encourage you to keep on doing the same type of presentation at the beginning. I know we talked about it in your office, to really highlight what 4J has been doing. Talk about 4J in action on programs in support, direct support to students and their families. Talk about the 3 meals and outreach and stuff like that. I think it's very important that you keep on talking about those. I know the district's pretty humble about that, but I know it makes a huge difference for families. So do bring, and I think it's wonderful. Joshua, thanks for putting her right into the beginning and that extra time. It's very useful for us to know that you're out there doing many things, which I knew, but we don't get to hear it. I am going to have a few questions, but what I like to do is to send them, say I'm here, but maybe on your time, Andrea, if you can maybe point me in the right direction or send the info back, because I know we have a few people in the queue. But I'm completely pleased that there is some more effort into the enhancing the natives program. I am interested in exactly what that means for the next couple of years. Same thing with emergent bilingual success. I know that I was going to ask about what does that mean, but I think you disclosed for teachers and staff, and I wanted to see what the impact has been and what's expected. The question here has to do with my specific interest on, you mentioned earlier about possible enrollment increases. And if you have those numbers, will be the same reflection as last year. I'm expecting more. I know we had a drop. And then how many hires altogether in the last 2 years and how many we lost. I'm interested in kind of knowing that. And then the other question was the debt service fund. Is 4J at any point, whether it's every couple of years, did you do research to find ways to reduce or the interest? Because 8% or a percentage or whatever does significant thousands of money to save. So I don't know if 4J continuously search for, saving money there.
Juan Carlos?
Yes, sir.
I could answer that really quickly for you. We actually, in 2020, we went out and did what was called an advanced refunding. So our financial advisor went out and looked at all of our outstanding bond issuances and identified those that could be refinanced and reduce the interest rate for our taxpayers. So we're not required to do this, but we felt that it was important to do this to, keep the costs for our taxpayers as low as we possibly could. We went out with this advanced refunding, and we actually saved the taxpayers $9 million in interest on the the issuances that we refinanced. So we are constantly monitoring the bond market and looking at our past issuances and determining if there are any opportunities to reduce the cost to our taxpayers. That's very important to us to make sure that the cost of borrowing is as reasonable as we can make it.
And the last three things also to take home and maybe send later, I'm interested, what kind of support there is for seniors, graduating seniors to get ready for college. I know that's been huge, it's been an ongoing process, but it kind of occurred to me about, dropout prevention and all of that. So I'm interested in what is high schools and teacher mentor programs. I want to learn more about what is that? What does that mean for the teachers, especially the freshmen, the fresh people or the new teachers? And then finally, equity and inclusion. What does that mean? I mean, are we already done? I know that board member Maya was working on, or some of you were working on defining what equity and inclusion is. I asked for those definitions, but pleased to see that. But I want to know, what does that mean? How will you measure that you have, in fact, success in equity and inclusion? So those things to take home and when you have a chance. Thank you.
And thank you. I've got my two budget folks, Sharon and Bob, taking notes on all of your questions so that we can go back and we can work on bringing back the answers at our May 2nd meeting. So everything you throw out, we will make note of and work hard to bring you back your answers.
Thank you for the courtesy. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. And I'll just say before I turn to Gary that if there are other questions that you can't necessarily answer tonight, or staff or more information we're asking for, I ask my fellow committee members please to bring that forward, and we'll give you more homework, unfortunately, but it's important stuff, so appreciate it. I have Gary, and then Tom, Maya, Laura, and then Erica. So let's go to Gary.
Hey, good evening. I apologize. My camera is being difficult and not working this evening. So thank you for your patience with that. I just wanted to thank Andrea and Sid, Carrie, Lisa, and the rest of the staff for your time and efforts for putting the presentation together for us so we have a better understanding of where we're going forward. So thank you for that. My question really is around College Now and the opportunities for expanding those opportunities for high school students. When presenting around the high school success dollars, you talked about IB and AP opportunities. So any additional information about College Now opportunities where students don't have to take tests in order to acquire college credits while they're in school would be appreciated, as well as your thinking around what funding mechanisms are best for funding additional College Now credits. Thank you.
Is that something can be answered right now, or is that more of a question for information for next time, Gary?
I would leave that to Andrea and Sid. They're the ones to know whether or not it's a quick question or something they should put more thought into.
Well, I would say that we should probably put College Now on the slide. We just didn't, so we have those programs, and you're right, they weren't on the slide. But we can get you more information on how prevalent they are across the district.
Well, thank you for that, Sid. My thought is more like how we can expand those rather than just how we are currently spending for additional staffing and building up those programs for students. So again, we're not relying on standardized tests to determine whether or not students are able to get college credits while they're in our system. Thank you.
And one of the quick things, just before I return to Tom, if any of the people, committee members here have questions, if it's about a specific slide number, for example, give the number in your question as well. Just it helps us keep going. Go ahead, Tom.
Yes, I had a couple questions, actually three, but Juan Carlos covered two of them, and I'm also interested in the particulars of the natives program. It's going up, I think, to 2 FTE. I'm wondering how that takes form. Is what's involved in that? The same thing with the mentor program. I'm very interested in seeing what changes are going to be made in this budget, this proposed budget. The one that hasn't been mentioned that I had underlined was the particulars on improving third grade reading from the SIA money. That I'm really interested in to see what we're doing with that. So that may be something that you can't answer right now, but I am interested in it. Those are my three.
Andrea or Sid or anyone else, anything on that right now?
We do have more information on the third grade reading, both in the superintendent's message in the budget document, as well as in the financial planning section. But I think it would be great to bring that back as a slide and have the folks who are really, moving that forward talk to you at the next meeting. I always find that it's so much easier when you have people who are really doing the work there and able to talk you through what those numbers and what those positions really are going to do for our kids.
I would agree that the limiting factor is time, and it's a very broad budget. I do understand that, but yeah, I do agree. That would be great.
Great. Next we have Maya, and then Laurel and Erica. Go ahead, Maya.
Thank you. I would love to add to that list of hearing from folks about the specifics of how this money is going to be spent. The under student investment account, the $2.2 million for behavior framework and support services, and then a few slides later was a behavior consultant. So I don't necessarily need that answer now, but I would love to hear more about that in particular, since we kind of stalled our work with the All Students Belong process. I just would like to hear that in conjunction with that future conversation. I do have a question, and this is kind of specific, but I'm just gonna ask it now. If it has an answer now, that's great. If not, later. I'm wondering why kinder EAs are at 5.5 hours, and what happens with that extra hour Monday through Friday and the extra 15 minutes on Fridays. I just don't know which hour of the day suddenly doesn't need an EA. And then two more things. The bilingual, the emerging bilingual student success $1 million. I'm curious if that's going to ELD, to English language development learners, or is that going to bilingual education? Is any of that going to supporting the maintenance and the development of one's native language, or is that focused exclusively on developing English language? And then I want to talk about Art Spark in front of our district office, in front of so many different schools. Elementary, we see signs for Art Spark, and Art Spark is near and dear to my heart as a person who is involved in the arts. My understanding is we are losing Rotary Club's support, and I'm concerned about that. And I know this is kind of like a line item question, but because these are all such big numbers and big picture things, I'm wanting to make sure that we are committing. From my understanding, the executive director of Lane Arts Council indicated to me that we would need $100,000 as a line item to support for next year. And once Rotary Club's support is completely gone after that, $150,000. And considering for elementary school students, this is the only thing that is district-wide, I want to put a little emphasis on making sure that we, it's a big number, but compared to these other huge numbers, it feels a little more doable than some other things. So
Maya, I'll have someone from instruction call because we also pay money towards arts work, so I'll try to figure out exactly what's happening, because I know that the district pays some, and I know that Rotary pays some, so I'm trying to.
these, yeah, I know that they're fundraising, these numbers, and I can forward you the email, but these numbers were the numbers that Stacy Ray from Wayne Arts Council shared with me, that in order to cover the costs that Rotary Club was pulling out, 4J would need to cover if we didn't find someone like Rotary Club, so.
Great. Thank you, Maya. Next will be Laurel, then Erica, then Judy, and I'm going to put myself in the queue after that. Go ahead, Laurel.
Can you hear me? Okay, so I have been asking for several weeks, so maybe you have this information, for raising base wage to $18 an hour and other wages accordingly. Do we have numbers for that?
We do not have numbers in this budget presentation for that.
Because you had said you were going to get back to me on that, and I hadn't heard anything. So
Since that is a compensation issue, which is usually not handled in the budget process, I would need to connect up with Christine Nesbitt, our in-house counsel, and determine with her how best to present that.
well, so the board is in charge of what we pay. It's not. It's been told to me that we decide how much salaries are. So it's unfortunate that I've been told several times I would get this information and then it just doesn't happen. And now you're saying you're going to talk to council before you tell me about it. And we're talking about, we have people working and living in poverty wages for our school district. So I would love to hear this information. Does it mean we're going to be doing it this year? Maybe not, but I think it's part of the culture of 4J is just not to put the information out there. And I would love to change that culture to getting all the information out there so we can all get together and make an informed decision, because that's so important. My other question is, and this I haven't asked before, how many staff do we have, and of that amount, how many have full benefits? Because that is also part of salary.
So, Josh, with your permission, I'd like to see if Christine is in the house. I don't know if she's there. So Laurel, this would be a negotiations. We'd have to negotiate it with OCA. We're not saying no, we just haven't negotiated yet. So Christine, are you?
I am, yeah. And Laurel, I want to assure you that we've heard the request and we were preparing to discuss that in an executive session. It's accurate that the board is in charge of setting compensation. However, that also by law must be negotiated. And even if it's to the benefit of an employee, it still must be negotiated. And so we're going to be holding an executive session in the near future, I hope, and we'll be able to talk about this at that time.
And so in executive session, the budget committee needs to understand this. So could you explain, Christine, how we share this information with the budget?
Actually, the budget committee doesn't need to understand it, I don't believe, because they don't set the negotiation strategy for the district. That's the board prerogative solely. And it's also the board prerogative in the end to vote on the budget. The budget committee makes a recommendation, but they do not ultimately decide the budget. That is up to the board. And because it's tricky when we're in negotiations, And as a practical matter, we're not going to be negotiating in public. So calls from the dais about we should do this, we should do that. I appreciate that, but the reality is that the board as a whole has to establish negotiations parameters. And I know this issue is near and dear to your heart and probably many of your hearts, and we'll be able to talk about that in the very near future in the context of what do we do?
Okay, and so my second question was about how many staff we have, and of that amount, how many have full benefits. That doesn't seem like that needs to be secret information.
Oh, no, that isn't. That's out there. If it takes some gathering though. That's to see how many we have staffed at. Yeah, I mean that's information we can definitely get. It's just not off the top of my head. Yeah.
So you're the first thing, Sydney. Okay, I got it. Okay, so so when you guys come back, could we get that information for the full budget committee so they have that information? Because while we may not be able to change everything, I think it's really good to be aware when we talk about the amount of staff we have and who gets paid what. Part of the benefit of working somewhere is having benefits.
Could you ask for the number of hours at what point do you get benefits?
Oh yeah, at what point do you get benefits? Yeah.
Sydney, may I? Laurel, I can tell you that right now, anyone who is considered a kind of a regular status employee, as opposed to say a student worker or a seasonal employee, anyone who makes or who works more than 4 hours a day or half time is entitled to a contribution from the district.
But I'm not sure what that means.
An insurance contribution. So in other words, we make a contribution, and I believe that I actually, then there's, we have tiered rates. And so we do provide the district contribution. Or numbers in their family, they may have to pay portions of that. In fact, that's pretty common. But so I can't give you all the details of the census other than to say, if a classified member or licensed member works more than half time, then they're entitled to a district insurance contribution, and they're entitled to sign up for insurance.
Okay, that's good to know. And if we could know the amount of what that, because I imagine the contribution changes between full or half time. Is that what I'm understanding from what you're saying?
We can give you the rate sheets.
So just having all that information for the budget, can be probably a whole slide again of that kind of information, because the reason I'm asking this is because in a different meeting, Sydney had mentioned not everybody can work full time. So one good thing that we provide is I guess I don't know how to say it. The wellness center?
Yeah, wellness clinic.
The wellness clinic, which they can go to. But I would also, that made me wonder how many people fit in this category where they don't have benefits and that's their only kind of resource. So I would really like to understand that, so we can, as a board and a budget committee, are aware of who's in need of this, and maybe we're missing some, maybe we're not. All right, thank you for that. The other thing I had was under one of the slides, you had the amount of FTE, but mental health specialists did not have an FTE amount next to it. And is that because it changed recently, Sydney?
No, if it did not have an FTE number next to it, it was a 1.0, so one individual full-time.
Okay, but
I concur.
Okay, but we have 4 new, or is there something else?
There's some, is that expansion? For mental health, I'm trying.
So this is actually, I think you're speaking of slide 19, where we talked about special education behavior supports. This
Sure,
is, sorry. So this is just a position that was added in addition to others using the American Rescue Plan funds and the ESSER 2 grant funds. So it's over and above other positions that we've added from other sources.
So that you were pulling that out, those were different just to that fund.
Yes, those were just the positions we had added with the source of funds of the American Rescue Plan and the ESSER 2 grant.
Okay, and so when Sydney was talking about at the beginning, before, I thought they were mental health specialists, one for each high school.
We have social workers for each region.
I will, we'll do this later, but it'd be good for, since as a budget committee, we have talked about mental health resources and understanding what they are. And one thing that I found confusing, and maybe other people on the committee can let me know if they find this confusing, we have a lot of different jobs that talk about mental health or psychology or something, and they don't all do the same thing. Some are guidance counselors really, but they're called counselor. And so everybody's like, well, we have a counselor. And I'm like, I don't, my son has told me, the person who just told me he was failing math is not the person he's gonna go talk to about his problems. So I just wanna make sure we all understand what the job roles are, and if there could be a really easy cheat sheet around the mental health stuff, I'd really appreciate that. Thank you, I appreciate all your work that you guys have done on this. I know it's a large novel, maybe even a tome. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Laurel and Cindy and Christine for answering it, and Andrea as well. We have Erica, Judy, and then I put myself in the queue after that. Time check at 7:11. And I think we want a hard stop at or even before 7:30. I'm looking at board members for a little guidance here because I know you have, I think, starting at 7:30 again, right? Okay. So Erica, you next, then Judy, then me, and then we'll see if anyone else, if we have time. Juan Carlos, I see your hand as well. With all respect, if someone else who hasn't spoken yet also raises their hand, I might want to give them a chance first, but let's go with Erica right now.
I wanted to say thank you for keeping the free lunches in. I think that's important. So Laurel asked, one of the questions I wanted was to make sure that the 3.5 FTE for special ed and the 4.0 FTE for 504 plans, those are new positions, correct? And then one of my questions is, you've got 2.1 for licensed speech therapist. I was wondering if in that plan, one of the things we're going to be focusing on is trying to improve augmented communication, AAC devices, and things for students that are not always speaking. So I was curious if the speech therapists were going to be addressing that. One of my other questions is listed under this behavior support as a mental health specialist and a behavior consultant. One of the questions I'd really like to know is, what are these people's qualifications and their training? You know, I always want to bring up, I want to make sure that we're not bringing in a behaviorist model or any kind of ABA approaches to be working with this group of students that often does not have needs met and is, you know, marginalized. So I want to make sure these people are coming at this from not a behaviorist standpoint. So those are my biggies.
Does anyone have answers to any of that right now, or are you marking it down for Sydney for next time to bring back some more info?
Yep, we'll bring back Kat Lang and the team to be able to answer some of these questions in much more detail than we can.
Excellent. Judy, and then me, and then I do see Ann and Dakota, so I'd like to let them go ahead of Juan Carlos, if that's okay. I appreciate it. Thanks for nodding and thumbs up. Judy, go ahead.
Slide 19, I think maybe this is one easy, the expansion of the after school BEST program. I'm just wondering how many schools were in BEST and how many are going to get it. I think it's such an important program. I think there's good data. We need childcare.
Is Brooke Wagner on the call? I only have a screen of mine. She is.
Hi, Judy. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I'm trying the earbuds for the first time, so thanks. We expanded this past year to Holt and Willa Gillespie, and we're expanding to a school that we haven't yet spoken to the school about yet, but we are expanding to one more and next year with the possibility of adding another one. One of the things about our best is program is that obviously we work with community partners. And so we want to make sure that we're aligned with our community partners, because as we are emerging from the pandemic, some of our community partners are having a hard time employing people too. So we have Willa Gillespie and Holt were off the ground this year, and we'll be adding one more. And Willa Gillespie and Holt did not start at the beginning of the year. We've added them throughout the year. So does that?
So were there other ones that were functioning before?
Oh yeah, I apologize. I think we're up to 9 with the ad for next year. So McCornack, Howard, El Camino. I wish I had these memorized, but I'll make sure that in the communication that we, from the questions that we're gathering tonight, I'll be sure to include it more comprehensively than off the cuff.
Great. Thank you, Judy and Brooke. I'm next in the queue. I'll just be real quick because I do want to go to Ann and Dakota and then Juan Carlos if we can. I just want to say that I want to thank staff for the work you put into this, because not only is it difficult, and as I think Sid said at the beginning, you're working on your regular jobs plus all the COVID stuff that we've been dealing with for 2 years now. And for those who don't know, I work in HR at a government agency of over 300 people. So I can tell you just from our end, I know what at least that part is like. But I will say that 2 of the things that are most personal to me as just a person, as a dad, but also more importantly, that you heard us as a committee talk about over the last few meetings, I think you've addressed well in this. And those 2 are the nutrition and the food issue. I know it's a budget, could be a budget buster in a couple of years, but that's so important. And I was almost crying when I saw that it was in the slides when I saw them before this meeting. And then second is mental health of our kids. I have 3 teenagers myself. A lot of you also have kids, or even if you don't, you obviously are here tonight because you care about kids, or maybe grandkids or whatever the situation is. But as a lot of people on this committee have made clear in the last couple of meetings, they're in crisis. All of us are in crisis after the COVID, but particularly our kids. And so I think, I'm looking forward to hearing more details about some of those positions that some of my colleagues have asked about and how they fit into it all. But, it's not just simply teaching anymore. There's so much more that the school district has to do. And so on those 2 issues, I really wanted to say thank you. Let me turn to Ann and then Dakota and then Juan Carlos.
All right, thanks, Josh. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Sydney. Super helpful information as usual. I want to express a little bit of concern about, there's a lot of one-time funds in the budget. And I am sure you guys are thinking hard about what to do with this. It definitely gives me a little bit of heartburn that it's not sustainable funds. We're going to create programs. What will happen as we move forward and those monies disappear? Do we have to cut programs? Do we have to lay off staff? And it's something that just one of those things that makes me worry on the money front. And then one of the programs that has come about since the pandemic is the Eugene Online Academy. I've heard really good things about this program. Does the district intend to keep moving it, to keep it after when we can all join you in the room?
My goal sitting here right now is that if the enrollment's there, we can keep it, because enrollment FTE pays for the teachers that are there. And I do think that we have picked up some people who were in different programs, not in 4J, that would stay if we kept it. So can you hear me? Is that what that?
No, just saying good job.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Good job.
Where am I? Dakota, I had you next on the list.
Okay, so I just have 2 simple questions. What are we doing to encourage enrollment in our schools? And I wanted to ask, is there any district in Oregon that you would know of that has adopted a universal free lunch program?
That is a great question. No, I don't know of anyone, but I will certainly start asking for the next meeting. I had 2 meetings with a number of superintendents, and I thought that could help me. So that's a good question. There are 197 districts across the state, so I maybe have access to 30 next weeks.
Thank you.
And Dakota's first question about enrollment.
Encourage enrollment. I think that as long as we keep giving options, especially for those families who have medically fragile, it could be parents or grandparents or a sibling. It would be important for us to keep the online school going, and we are not as bad off look at our percentages as many other districts, so I need to dig into that as well and figure out if our ELA is the reason why people stayed. So Ben lost a ton of kids and compared to us, and I don't think anyone's figured out exactly where everyone went.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dakota. I have Juan Carlos and then Maya. It's 7:20, so let's see if we get through these two, and then I think we could do our wrap up to talk about next meetings, next steps, questions, etc. Juan Carlos.
Thank you. Laurel, thank you for bringing your questions back. It actually got kind of triggered me to come back on the queue, because over the last several meetings, I have noticed sometimes a disconnect on requests for info and to try to see where a difference can be made. But tonight I discovered that really this is a dynamic or really a vibrant thirst for information to support education at the end of the day. Overall, I when I see somebody asking the same questions and requesting info, that translates to that's important for that person. And let us not go away from the learning today. For example, today I've learned from Christine that there may be some items that it may have to be put out for negotiation or for a bargain. That's great. But at the same time, I think it's important that it's honored, that the request for info is honored to bring it in. For example, we requested info about, can we feed the kids, for more time? What about the mental health therapist? How much will that cost? What about the librarian? How much will that cost? Not necessarily we're going to make a decision, but to bring that info so that we can determine, let's hold on to that because that's going to have to be negotiated. But bringing that info will really make this a more rich experience and bring everybody's, thinking hats to how to make it be more effective. So that made me think of that, and today I made those connections. So please consider to that we in fact we're asking for the info to not to make quick decisions, but because we have strong interest. So thank you.
Sorry, Maya, go ahead.
I remember, I believe it was our last budget committee, maybe it was the one before, we've had a lot, came on the same day that some other districts, I'm pretty sure it was Beaverton, had learned that they were receiving additional funds for this year based on the decreased enrollment. And I had asked what 4J was going to be receiving, if any, and I don't think we got to that. So I'm curious if that number is accessible. And I also just want to echo Laurel's request for a cheat sheet on the folks who are doing the services supporting our students in terms of social, emotional, and mental health support. But I know I've asked for this before, and I just want to, I want it to be more than a cheat sheet because I would like it to become a resource for our teachers as well. I know guidance counselors have a lot of this information, but instead of a teacher having to go to a guidance counselor who's already overworked, it would be nice if we had, and I called it a directory of care, but it doesn't need to be called that, but just something that outlines who the players are providing this type of care services and what their name is and contact information if it's possible, but at least we can always use our directory, it's a nifty feature, but just having a list with an explanation of the options would be helpful for this group, but I think it would be something that would serve everybody that's affiliated with 4J. But I really want to know about that number because I was hoping that it was something to be excited about.
And it actually is, I was going to talk about that at the last budget committee meeting, but we kind of ran out of time. So I'll give you a preview. We are actually up about $2.1 million. So we have not hit our, you might say, our original adopted target, but we are only about $800,000 below it. So much closer than we were in the past, but about $2.1 million coming our way in addition due to the changing enrollment at the state level and a recalculation of our share of the pie. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on Wednesday when we present the second and third quarter financial reports to the board. But good news coming our way.
Great, thank you. Time check, I have 7:25. And so an agenda check and maybe a process or next step check or something. In closing on wrap up, we're supposed to have items raised by committee members. I think we've been doing that a lot over the last half hour or more. And so I trust that staff has been taking good notes, and related to agenda items for the May 2nd meeting. And what's listed there, and this is on page 25 of the, at least my hand printed handout. Actually, there's 2 page numbers on it, 25 and 27. But it's towards the end of the slides, or I think it's the last page. We have budget committee 2 more meetings, May 2nd and May 16. And then the board itself, of course, has June 1 and June 22nd. So what it says for now is May 2nd discussion and approval of the 2022-23 proposed budget and declaration of taxes and levies, all that language that Andrea shared before. And then May 16 date held for additional meeting if needed to finalize the work of the budget committee. And I'm thinking that, and I'm looking for kind of nods or the opposite, shaking of heads, I guess, but I'm thinking at this point we should plan to have both those meetings. We've asked for a lot of information tonight, and May 2nd is only a week away. And so I know that's a lot for staff to do, but clearly if we can get everything answered, thought about, heard, voted May 2nd, great. But I would just, I think humbly ask that all of us on the committee do keep that May 16 date available as well. Any thoughts or any questions about that? Does that seem to make sense to people? I'm seeing some nods. Okay, good. So let's do that. So we have May 2nd and May 16. I think unless anyone has anything else, I know the board has more work to do after this meeting. So with everyone's permission, we'll give them 3 extra minutes before their 7:30 appointment and go get something to eat or drink or use the restroom or just take a nap if you can for 3 minutes. I don't know. Listen, I just want to say thank you all for your contributions. And I feel very fortunate, like I said before, to be part of all of you. We will see you all May 2nd for further discussions and answers, possibly a vote, or otherwise let's keep May 16 on as well. Have a very good night, everybody.
Night, guys.
Thank you.
Walk fast.